Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me today. I was cruising around the other day and I was trying to figure out an answer to a question I had and ended up traveling down a whole nother lane. So let me share with you what I know. I was looking around to figure out because I heard one of them talk about that marijuana impacted the MK7 process. Then I started really wandering around. I started because for the longest time I have wondered how all this transition that seems to be going on right now with everybody getting access to medications. Because, for example, now you can log online as of the last couple of years to order basically whatever you want, right? You could order pain pills, you could order antidepressants, and you can, in some cases, you have to maybe see a doctor, wink, wink, online, but basically you do not have to cruise into a doctor's office to get some pretty alarming medications. So that's been a huge, huge question on my mind and figured it out. There's a reason why. Because it all started with the Huxley and this eugenics program. That's why I'm always saying look to the beginning, because right now doctors are also a great example of how they turn on their own. Because now doctors are loaded up with college debt and they're getting lower and lower pay due to the takeover of private equity. I think in the future, what they're planning is that you will see a physician's assistant or a nurse instead of a doctor to save money, because that would be how they would further the medical system, right? Get people coming in thinking they're going to see a doctor, but in fact, most people are now being seen by other people other than doctors. So, granted, there's some doctors who got into being doctors because they wanted to heal people. That is a given, okay? But it has attracted, from my impression of doctors, from a doctors are revered basically in this society. And I only know about the United States because I know for a fact if you say anything about doctors, you are automatically labeled crazy. They will not even give you a chance to give them some examples of why doctors could be dangerous because they have been so idolized, right? They're the same crowd that when they make reservations at restaurants, they use the name doctor. So when their reservation is due, they'll say, Dr. So and so, table of four. They use that because they put themselves in a different class system than the rest of us, right? So they want us to admire them in those white coats. Well, that is a very good thing to do when you're setting up a scam, is get everybody to believe those people in the white coats. So what do I think's going on now? Well, I read a curious thing that billionaires are now donating money to make medical school free for the majority of students, for example, at Johns Hopkins University. And there's a few other, but I'm just going to talk about one of them right now. So what they're saying is that Michael Bloomberg donated $1 billion to make medical school free at Johns Hopkins. The billionaire said the donation addresses twin challenges: declining health and declining education. So I think it's a push because the money has been taken out of doctors, or it's being taken out now, right? Because doctors in the future, with private equity in charge, will not be making so much money. It was around the 1990s when we all got computers in our homes. They cooked up this program, which I can't remember right now, but there was actually a program that got developed. And that was at the point when doctors all around the world had a way to communicate with each other. They formed this group. It's fuzzy in my brain right now, but just follow along here. They formed this group in the mid 90s, so they were all in touch with each other. So, for all those people who say, what are you people crazy? You really think all the doctors got together and decided to do this? Well, yeah, they did. In fact, they did. So, and also, what I've learned along the way, because I've been talking about drugs and all this for a very long time, if you want to look at the truly dangerous drugs, then look at what they pushed on Africa. I've talked a lot about this ivermectin, ivermectin, or however you pronounce it. It's huge. They also have us giving ivermectin to our pets. They tell us that the pets can get heartworms, so let's put them on a steady diet of ivermectin. But everybody forgets the side effects. They're all pretty much drugs that are bad for our DNA. And this one in particular, ivermectin, is the one they always shout from the rooftops, give us ivermectin. Yet they're giving it out in Africa like candy because it's cheap and it's a eugenics tool. And we're constantly being programmed to take drugs. The people in charge, even the people that everybody seems to like on social media, the ones on YouTube and stuff, I'm not mainstream media, you should listen to me. Well, they're just another version of mainstream media. Or why would they have to, every show these people bring up 100 times per show? Well, I'm not mainstream media, as I proceed to read from mainstream media articles. Why do they say that so much if they're not? Why do they have to constantly reinforce that into everybody's brains? Because they just offer us two sides of the coin. So I started looking into further. I did find my answer sort of as far as if marijuana impacts MK7, but I stumbled onto way, way, way more interesting things, because prescription drugs in this country are in fact now the leading cause of death. So how have we been maneuvered into this prescription drug and doctor thing? Well, let me first off tell you what I have down below for you to take a look at. The only reason I'm publishing all of these details down below is because if you understand it as well as I now understand it, it will be easier to relay it to other people in your life that you care about. If you could give them some added information without creating any kind of conflict. Remember, we cannot antagonize and persuade at the same time. Not everybody is thinking like we are, right? But we weren't always thinking this way in the past. So we need to give the rest of the people time and space. And you don't give them time and space by the minute you see them take a pill, challenge them on that pill. What I suggest doing is really learn, like I had to learn. I'm just going through all this stuff and I'm still learning myself why we got all these drugs, right? Maybe if people understand why they're taking that pill and that it's not for good, you might start to perk their interest. And you're going to get further by perking interest more than sitting people down and screaming in their faces. So how did this all get started? Well, the interesting thing is I found exactly how it got started with those Huxleys, the Huxley brothers. I found a quote, and I also found more information, which I'll have down, that I'll be speaking about later, about where they came up with LSD, because for the longest time, I thought that Timothy Leary came up with LSD. Excuse me. So that is why I do research as opposed to going online and spewing just ideas, because I thought Leary was the one that gave us LSD, but no, actually it wasn't. So we'll go over all that today, and I will do it hopefully in a way that we could all walk away clear about this whole picture, because these Huxley brothers kind of have me a bit confused. So let's just boil it down here. Huxley was one of the most influential eugenicists of all time. He was also secretary of the Zoological Society of London, the first director of UNESCO, a founding member of the World Wildlife Fund, and the first president of the British Humanist Association. Well, this Huxley we're talking about today, Aldous Huxley, Aldous Huxley, Aldous Huxley predicted that drugs would one day become a humane alternative to flogging for rulers wishing to control recalcitrant subjects. So he was looking to the future and seeing that drugs would become a better alternative to then flogging or beating us, right? He also had another brother to pay attention to, Thomas Henry Huxley, or T.H. Huxley. In 1926, let me see, I've already got their names screwed up here. Leonard Huxley, let me see here. Well, let me keep reading. Aldous is the one who predicted that. That's why I'm saying it's pretty tricky with these Huxleys. So I'll try to focus to not make it confusing. Okay. I think this Huxley was related to them. Okay. But let me just read here. In 1926, Leonard Huxley published his Progress and the Unfit, which was subsequently used to promote the eugenics movement, to which H.G. Wells and Leonard's son, Julian, were outspoken, avid supporters. Leonard also wrote favorably of his father, T.H. Huxley's views and that of Charles Darwin. So this Leonard is a son of the T.H. Huxley, okay? And in his book, Leonard discusses how modern day science is only to look at the interdependence of body and mind, that the existence of the soul has been discredited by modern science, and thus that conditions for improvement of the human condition must rely solely upon social and biological. He goes on to state that modern society has too long tolerated the proliferation of the feeble-minded and so creates an everlasting burden for itself. He claims that mental defectiveness, which range from criminal behavior, insanity, physical deformities, and forms of mental retardation to addictions such as alcoholism and gambling, homelessness, growing massive debt, etc., were all to be considered heritable qualities. It's kind of funny when you look at it another way, because all of their people, the ones online going out for the rest of us, well, they all themselves exhibit criminal behavior. They all appear to be on drugs and stuff, right? I don't look at these people online who are all raging, I'm not mainstream media, come listen to me. The Jimmy Dores, Glenn Greenwald, those people just do not strike me as overly happy. Look at their eyes as they're trying to hoodwink the rest of us. So I'll keep reading here. So anyway, they don't like that we might have some of these qualities, but I would have to argue that their own team is definitely engaging in criminal behavior, right? They're also engaging in addictions, alcoholism, gambling. They owe massive debts. This country, the United States of America, was broke from the day they landed here. It has always been out of money. That's why they swapped it to be a corporation in 1871. It has been broke since the day one. How they ever trick people into loaning this country all this money still amazes me to this day, because people are still loaning the United States money, even though in 1933 they took the entire country bankrupt. They put every U.S. citizen under the deal of we are all considered enemies of the state, and none of that is lifted. The United States is still bankrupt today. And we, fellow lab rats, are all still considered enemies of the state. So let's talk about Aldous Huxley, the father of these other Huxleys. Aldous Huxley is best known for his 1932 book, Brave New World, which became a model for much dystopian science fiction that followed. Brave New World was written between World War I and World War II, the height of an era of technological optimism in the West. Huxley picked up on such optimism and created the dystopian world of his novel so as to criticize it. But what exactly were Aldous Huxley's views? Did he, in fact, believe in the need for a scientific dictatorship, a scientific caste system? Was he actually warning the people that such a dystopia would occur if we did not correct our course? Or was it all part of a mass psychological conditioning for what was regarded as inevitable, and that Huxley's role was rather to soften the transition as much as possible towards a dictatorship without tears? So down below, I also have articles about this theory called dysgenics. Some of this stuff I'm not really familiar with myself. I'm just sharing where I am with this stuff. I also have an interesting write-up about Aldous Huxley. I found it in the New World Encyclopedia. And who is at the center of all this stuff? They're getting drugs into all the kids' minds. Well, Silicon Valley to the rescue. Silicon Valley has been over there busy raising money to fund these online pharmacies to make sure that everybody in America can now get drugs. All you have to do is have an internet connection. I found a fascinating article written actually by a doctor called Prescription Drugs Are the Leading Cause of Death. I will only be quoting part of his article. I strongly suggest you read that article in thorough because he makes a million good points about all of the different drugs that are leading to this eugenics. Another article, many arthritis and pain meds are tainted with harmful drugs. Are you aware that if you think you have arthritis, you could also treat it by removing certain vegetables from your diet? Yeah, it happened to me. They tried to put me on arthritis drugs. Turns out it was because of the vegetables I was eating. Things like tomatoes and potatoes can cause inflammation and mimic arthritis. And some people will say, well, I'll never give up my tomatoes and my potatoes. Well, that's clearly a choice you have to make. But when I was so sick, it was because of all the other elements that I developed this severe issue with potatoes and tomatoes to the point that they wanted to put me on medication for arthritis. And I started thinking that doesn't make sense. Well, I looked around and I found information. I stopped eating potatoes and tomatoes for about a month. My symptoms went away. I was able to reintroduce them. But if you find yourself heavily attracted to things like tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, they're in a category called nightshade vegetables. And now you won't find much information online because last time I looked, a lot of it has been scrubbed. But if you think you got arthritis and cranky joints and stuff, cut out those things first and see what happens. There is a lot we can do for ourselves. I also found a good article about online prescribing of controlled substances. Yes, it's a real deal. I found the act that made all this happen. There was an act called that extended the telemedicine flexibilities. They have extended that act until December of 2024. So, granted, they're probably going to be renewing that act, but I found the actual act that is now allowing them to sell us dangerous medications online. And along the way, I have not explored these yet myself, but I have the links below. So if you want to take a look for yourself, there was a person I mentioned in the past called Fritz Springmeier. He wrote the book about the Illuminati bloodlines. I found his book over on the CIA website, which I found kind of curious, but that aside, what I wasn't aware of is that Fritz also wrote another book with a person called Cisco Wheeler, which I understand is not the person's real name. So I have links to that because he has a big book that these two people have done called Undetectable Mind Control. And that is also down below for you to take a look at. So let me go over here. So yes, I haven't looked at all this Fritz MK Ultra stuff. It's hundreds of pages and just haven't had a chance yet. So let's keep going here first. And what I find interesting about all this is we're constantly being programmed to keep taking these drugs, right? Everybody's yelling, ivermectin, take more of it, and nobody's stopping to ask about the side effects. There are also all of these anti-vaccine people who are cropping up because it's better to be on the anti-vaccine side now that all the issues are rising, right? Well, they still think all the other vaccines are okay. I haven't heard any of them mention that the other stuff is bad. Now, have you? I haven't. I haven't at all. So let's talk about why prescription drugs are the leading cause of death. See, it's interesting that prescription drugs are the leading cause of death. Now, maybe there is a possibility here that I'd like to be very clear about. It could be that I have an axe to grind against Silicon Valley, or I'm crazy, or it could be a lot of other issues. So just because I am saying that medications are not good for us, I am in no way indicating that you should suddenly stop any pills that you were on, because that would be a deadly thing for you to do. I have been on these medications. I stopped them suddenly a couple of times. The outcome was not good. They are reorganizing all the circuits in our brain. So I caution you right now, if you look around and you think, hey, wait a minute, I'm taking some of these pills, I caution you to learn to be your own advocate. They refused to take me off all the pills, and I had to take myself off of them all on my own. It is a process and it can happen, but slow, slow, slow is the goal. So let me start this article by this doctor. Overtreatment with drugs kills many people and the death rate is increasing. It is therefore strange that we have allowed this long-lasting drug pandemic to continue. And even more so because most of the drug deaths are easily preventable. See, this man is actually being a really good doctor, right? He's looking around thinking, oh, why is this happening? Well, a lot of people don't understand that we're in the middle of a eugenics program, right? I'll go on to read from him. In 2013, I estimated that our prescription drugs are the third leading cause of death after heart attack and cancer. And in 2015, that psychiatric drugs alone are also the third leading cause of death. However, in USA, it is commonly stated that our drugs are only the fourth leading cause of death. This estimate was derived from a 1998 meta-analysis of 39 U.S. studies where monitors recorded all adverse drug reactions that occurred while the patients were in hospital, or which were the reason for hospital admission. This methodology clearly underestimates drug deaths. Most people who are killed by their drugs die outside hospitals, and the time people spend in hospitals was only 11 days on average in this meta-analysis. Moreover, the meta-analysis only included patients who died from drugs that were properly prescribed, not those who died as a result of errors in drug administration, non-compliance, overdose, or drug abuse, and not deaths where the adverse drug reaction was only possible. Many people die because of errors, simultaneously the use of contradicted drugs, but many possible drug deaths are real. And also, I've talked in the past, most doctors work on what they call the one organ theory. I always found that so weird that the psychiatrist treating me could care less about all the opioids and stuff the other doctors were giving me at the same time. But that is exactly why. Excuse me. So, okay. Moreover, most of the included studies are very old, the median publication being 1973, and drug deaths have increased dramatically in the last 50 years. As an example, 37,000 drug deaths were reported to the FDA in 2006. It was 123,000 10 years later, which is 3 times as many. In hospital records and coroner's reports, deaths linked to prescription drugs are often considered to be from natural or unknown causes. This misconception is particularly common for deaths caused by psychiatric drugs. Even when young patients with schizophrenia suddenly drop dead, it is called a natural death. But it is not natural to die young, and it is well known that neuroplexics can cause lethal heart arrhythmias. Many people die from the drugs they take without raising any suspicion that it could be an adverse drug effect. Depression drugs kill many people, mainly among the elderly, because they cause orthostatic hypertension, sedation, confusion, and dizziness. The drugs double the risk of falls and hip fractures in a dose-dependent manner, and within 1 year after a hip fracture, about 1/5 of the patients will have died. As elderly people often fall away, it is not possible to know if such deaths are drug deaths. Another example of unrecognized drug deaths is provided by non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs called NSAIDs, NSAIDs. Those are drugs like ibuprofen and those drugs. They have killed hundreds of thousands of people, mainly through heart attacks and bleeding stomach ulcers. But these deaths are unlikely to be coded as adverse drug reactions, as such deaths also occur in patients who do not take the drugs. So if patients get killed by heart attacks, they only look for that. They don't look to think, oh, did you get killed by your ibuprofen? Most tragically, leading psychiatrists all over the world do not realize how ineffective and dangerous their drugs are. A U.S. psychiatrist, Roy Perlis, Perlis, professor at Harvard, argued in April 2024 that depression pills should be sold over the counter because they are safe and effective. They are highly unsafe and ineffective. Perlis also claimed that depression drugs do not increase the risk of suicide in people older than 25, which is also wrong. They double suicides in adults. Perlis wrote that some still question the biological basis of this disorder, despite the identification of more than 100 genes that increase depression risk, and neuroimaging studies show differences in the brains of people with depression. Both these claims are plain wrong. Genetic association studies have come up empty-handed, and so have brain imaging studies, which are generally highly flawed. People are depressed because they live depressing lives, not because of some brain disorder. And that is the fact. People are depressed because they live depressing lives, not because of some brain disorder. Because people could no longer go to see their prescribers in person. In a lot of cases, the Drug Enforcement Administration changed the rules in something called the Ryan Haidt Act, a 2008 law that banned selling prescription drugs online. So in 2008, this is where we get to the beginning of this horror show, right? There was a law, the Ryan Hate Act, that banned selling drugs, okay, online. Well, what happened next? Funny you should ask. On October the 6th in 2023, the DEA and the HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, announced the continuation of a temporary extension of flexibilities around telemedicine prescribing of controlled substances from the COVID health emergency. So they evidently put a health emergency in place. I don't know what that exact piece was, but this all started in 2008 was how it all originated, right? So in 2023, they announced a continuation. So I don't know when it started, but not that important for the second. But so they say that this additional extension will allow time for the DEA to comprehensively review and incorporate the more than 38,000 customers received on the two companion proposed rules they released. I don't know what they're talking about. But anyway, so what they're saying is we're going to keep extending this and we're going to look into it, right? The emergency flexibilities will be extended in full until December the 31st, 2024. These flexibilities include this. Patients can be prescribed schedules 2 to 5 controlled substances without a prior in-person examination as clinically appropriate and within your normal scope of practice. DEA registration in one state allows prescriptions of controlled substances in any state. In most circumstances, the prescription of controlled substances in telehealth settings, meaning online, now for the first time since 2009, basically you could now get drugs that are controlled substances, which are so named and so regulated because you can get addicted to them. But now you can get all of these drugs, which include Adderall, anti-anxiety drugs, Klonopin, Xanax. These drugs that, in addition to having important medical uses, well, we question that, are also popular for recreational use. I swear most of those top people on social media, they're all on Adderall. Look at them. They're all on something. So I'll keep reading. So even before Ryan Hate law was rolled back, if you were poor or if you were uninsured or you were in a geographically remote place, the chances that you had access to the same level of mental health services were not great. And the idea that you could now get these prescribed to you online created access in a way that had not existed previously. Yes, every crook and cranny of this entire country, you can get your drugs shipped to you. And I'll just take a look at one of them. There's this company called Cerebral. The company offers 3 tiers of service. One is medication plus a care counselor who is not necessarily licensed, but they're there to talk to you about coping mechanisms, mindfulness, and stuff like that. There's another tier, which is the therapy only tier, and then there's therapy plus medicine. And that's where you get a licensed therapist plus medicine. For your first month, you can start for as little as $30 a month. After that, it's a monthly subscription between $85 and $235, depending on the tier of service you choose. Now, anybody who's familiar with trying to get mental health care in this country, including people who may be insured, but who a therapist doesn't take their insurance, those numbers are quite low. And at what price point you can meet a lot of unmet demand. I got this from their website because they're talking about how you can sign up with them, and this company will, it was from an investment standpoint, because the demand is great, people's access to drugs is unlimited. So, Cerebral was backed by SoftBank, a big Silicon Valley company. That's the same major venture investor that backed Uber and WeWorks. Anybody notice how well Uber and WeWork worked out? A lot of folks we spoke with talked specifically about Uber. This idea that the people providing the service are doing a piecework model. Nurses are getting paid per visit, and for patients, it's meant to be the same hyper ease that Uber offers. The wait times are going to be lower and it's going to be cheaper, and you're going to be able to get the help you need that you're not able to get in the brick and mortar healthcare system near you. And repeat after me, evil always has to come packaged as help. So it looks like they're trying to help all these people in different parts of the country that don't have access, right? And the company's growth is also very similar to a lot of venture-backed startups. It's worth 4.8 billion as of December, and it launched in January of 2020. See that? Imagine that, just in time to give us drugs online. Imagine how that worked out. That's a $5 billion company in 2 years. That's super fast growth. They operate in all 50 states now. So they recently announced a partnership with the National Health Service in the UK. So I'm going to be moving past Cerebral. There are other ones like that out there. There was one company that I didn't find my file on it, but yeah, they're located in Colorado to give out hormones to the kids. So yeah, there's all these companies cropping out thanks to Silicon Valley. And they went on to say one thing that they were struck by when reporting this story is just how popular Adderall has become in America and how widespread its use is. In the second quarter of 2021, which is the most recent data that they currently found, the amount of amphetamines prescribed in the U.S., of which Adderall is one, jumped at the highest rate it had since early 2012. Roughly the equivalent of 9 million maximum dosage Adderall XR pills, which gives you a sense of the market that is available for companies to prescribe these medications. And they went on to say, before I came to talk to you, I did a little search and Googled get ADHD meds online. My first sponsored ad was for Cerebral. And I wonder what this tells you, if anything, about the company. So, yeah, we have this, they talk about this surge of ADHD influencers and mental health influencers on TikTok and Instagram, talking about their own diagnosis, and that's creating more conversations, and more people are wondering about whether they might have ADHD as well. There's this company in Silicon Valley now called System One, a new biotech company, and this is a great deal. I don't mean great like good, okay? I think, now remember, I'm just thinking right now, okay? I think companies like this System One are going to be the next approach, because a lot of people are getting wise to the harms of pharmaceuticals, right? Now they got to come up with something new, right? Well, have you never noticed that the premise is always that we are a bunch of sick people, right? And we need their help. I think the reverse should be true, but I don't want to get sidetracked right now. Have you looked at them? They're falling to pieces. Now there's allegations that the current Joe Biden may have Parkinson's. There's all this arguing going on about these Parkinson's experts showing up at the White House, and people are saying, what are you hiding? Why is Biden seeing Parkinson's experts? Well, because a lot of them get Parkinson's, the nerve tremors from all those hormones. As a matter of fact, I saw an interview with Jerry Seinfeld recently, and he, to me, remember, I'm not a doctor, but I have been studying these hormones for a long time. Jerry Seinfeld, to me, looks pre-Parkinson's, just that little shaking is going on in his head. But anyway, so I digress. So they have this new company called System One, okay? And this is a good one. They always go to these extremes, right? Like, oh, look at this. We got the moon under control. Look at NASA, all these fake satellites, right? So System One is a new biotech company growing mini brains. So they claim they're growing these tiny brains called mini brains. I'll try to read this without laughing too hard. Many brains to create new drugs for psychiatric diseases, including autism, epilepsy, and schizophrenia. By growing the organoids from the stem cells of patients with the diseases, they hope to illuminate new hallmarks of the illnesses and then make treatments that target those hallmarks. Backed by the venture arm of giant drug company Pfizer and several of Silicon Valley's leading venture capitalist firms, System One has now raised $25 million. That's been from a few months ago, okay? And what do they say here? The researchers are employed by a small but well-funded startup called System One. Traditionally, in neuroscience, drug developers have honed in on specific molecules or cells that they believe play a role in psychiatric diseases. But System One scientists are zooming out. They are looking instead for key hallmarks of diseases that may reside across large networks of brain activity and cause everything from the forgetfulness of schizophrenia to the seizures common in epilepsy. And another little interesting factoid, if you haven't been put on medication yourself, you might not know this. Most of the medications they had me on all came from the world of epilepsy. And all of these kids today, and I've gone through pretty much all of YouTube, all of these kids sit around talking about the medications they're on. All of these kids are on the exact same medications they had me on. They do not know what they're doing is the reason, right? So, he said, the traditional target-based drug discovery approach is broken, says the co-founder and CEO of System One. At the same time, people are hungry for innovation. The idea that sick systems, rather than simply sick molecules or sick cells, cause psychiatric disease has only recently begun to yield new research efforts. It may also be one of the reasons why some drug giants are returning to neuroscience despite previous failed attempts to create new drugs for diseases like depression. In October, drug giant Pfizer resurrected its brain division by launching the company Cerebral Therapeutics. Allergan and Johnson & Johnson have also made recent rebounds into the area with investments in depression drugs inspired by the club drug ketamine. And remember, I've been talking about ketamine. Ketamine is I'm guessing it's being prescribed to the U.S. military people because they're taking the people that aren't doing well on ketamine and suggesting that they do ECT, deadly brainwave stuff. Several big-time investors are betting that System One's system-level approach could work. They include Pfizer's venture arm, as well as bi-coastal venture firm CRV and the Longevity Fund, the first venture capital firm dedicated entirely to anti-aging startups. Frederick Kirsch, the COO and co-founder of the enterprise identity software company Okta, OKTA, serves on System 1's board of directors and was joined by CRB's George Zachary and Pfizer's Margie McLaughlin. God, they got the gang all organized, right? So I'll just read you a little bit more because I find this stuff pretty interesting what they're cooking up, right? Current attempts at creating drugs could be missing the forest for the trees. For decades, researchers who study psychiatric diseases have been coming up with new drugs by honing in on what they believe are broken or sick molecules or cells that may be causing the symptoms of the disease. But in about 90% of cases, some part of their theses about those molecules was wrong in the first place, and large amounts and time of billions of dollars have been wasted. So this is how it works. You admit that you made a mistake, right? We made such a mistake with all these medications. We thought we were really helping you people, but now, wait a minute. Don't be so quick to call us evil because we've come up with a solution, right? So, because still most of our current drugs are a part of this model. The most popular drugs for schizophrenia, for example, target dopamine, a molecule that's thought to play a key role in memory and pleasure. But these drugs fail to help many people. One reason is that many schizophrenia symptoms, from hallucinations to memory loss, could be the result of a much more fundamental set of cross-brain issues. But current drug development approaches in neuroscience don't probe these system-level problems. Instead, they focus on one or two isolated components of the disease. And this person goes on to say, that's a tragic oversight. He thinks it could also explain why so many medications fail to help patients. Well, they're certainly working on a way to fix this problem, right? So let's get to the marijuana part of the brain. I was looking because I read something and then I couldn't find where I read it, blah, 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 blah. And that led me to all this stuff. So it's all good, right? The only quotes I could find on the marijuana thing came from Kathy O'Brien, the one who's supposedly the MK Ultra expert. And this is her quote: "The effects of marijuana on the brain are not conducive to mind control because it actually opens neuron pathways in the brain. It expands thought." So Kathy Bryan, she's the one I talked about her just really recently. She was the one, she's been very vocal about the CIA and their mind control programs. She's also there to trick us. So anyway, so they're saying that it doesn't affect, they don't want people smoking pot because it enters the pathways differently. And let me see here. They said that for those who don't know what MK Ultra is all about, it's a very real CIA mind control program where the CIA was dosing Americans with LSD from roughly 1950 to the 1970s. In 1973, all of the MK Ultra documentation was destroyed by then CIA Director Richard Helms, covering up the records of 150 secretly funded programs. Helms was suspended by the U.S. Congress in 1977 for lying about the U.S. government's anti-government activities abroad and illegal surveillance domestically. So they destroyed all the records in the 70s, right? 1973, they destroyed them. Just like the stuff for the moon, right? NASA says that they lost how they got to the moon. Well, that's kind of convenient, isn't it? Don't these people seem to have a pattern of destroying records? What about all the census records that got destroyed around World War II, or excuse me, around the Civil War? Huh. Destruction of records seems to kind of be their deal. Just like when they marched into Washington and burned up the Capitol building and stuff. Well, that was another reason to destroy records, right? They acted like the British did it. They're all in the same plot. So this is a little bit interesting what they say about this. They say that essentially, Kathy went on to explain that cannabis induces neuroplasticity, which interrupts the mind control mechanism. Her husband quickly chimed in and said, this doesn't mean that you can't be controlled, but it makes it harder. So let's get to the Huxleys. Aldous Huxley predicted that drugs would one day become a humane alternative to flogging for rulers wishing to control recalcitrant subjects. He wrote this in a letter to his former student George Orwell in 1949. But now psychoanalysis is being combined with hypnosis, and hypnosis had been made easy. Excuse me. Oh, let me keep reading this. This is the letter that Huxley wrote to George Orwell in 1949. Okay, so I'm reading it right now. By now, psychoanalysis is being combined with hypnosis, and hypnosis has been made easy and indefinitely extensible through the use of barbiturates, which induce a hypnoid and suggestible state in which even the most recalcitrant subjects. Within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and narco-hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons, and that the lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging and kicking them into obedience. And that was his letter. So then I was wandering around. I found this piece that said decades later, one of CIA's own MK Ultra researchers, Dr. Louise West, while citing Huxley, had this to say on the matter. The role of drugs in the exercise of political control is also coming under increasing discussion. Control can be through prohibition or supply. The total or even partial prohibition of drugs gives the government considerable leverage for other types of control. An example would be the selective application of drug laws permitting immediate search or no-knock entry against selected components of the population, such as members of certain minority groups or political organizations. But a government could also supply drugs to help control a population. This method, foreseen by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, 1932, has the governing element employing all drugs selectively to manipulate the governed in various ways. To a large extent, the numerous rural and urban communes, which provide a great freedom for private drug use and where hallucinogenics are widely used today, are actually subsidized by our society. Their perpetuation is aided by parental and other family remittances, welfare and unemployment payments, and benign neglect by the police. In fact, it may be more convenient and perhaps even more economical to keep the growing numbers of chronic drug users fairly isolated and also out of the labor market, with its millions of them being unemployed. To society, the communards with their hallucinogenic drugs are probably less bothersome and less expensive, if they are living apart than if they are engaging in alternative modes of expressing their alienation, such as active, organized, vigorous political protest and dissent. Well, they basically analyzed it and said, well, hey, we're better off if we keep them in remote communities and drugged up, right? So, the idea of drugs for control seems to be an ancient one. Italian professor Piero Camporesi, writing on medieval Italy in his book, Bread of Dreams, said this: adulterated breads, meaning bread, like you eat, bread, had been put into circulation by the untory of public health. Criminal attacks orchestrated by the provisionary judges who were supposed to oversee the well-balanced provisions of the public square. So what they did was they started, the judge of provisions in the square of Modena in Italy was arrested along with bakers for having had 40 sacks of bay leaf ground to be put into the wheat flour to make bread for the square, where it caused the poverty to those who brought it to worsen, so that for 2 days there were many people sick enough to go crazy, and during this time they could not work or help their families. So that was the first time that I could find them using this stuff, right? By putting it into bread, handing it out to people, making them go nuts so they couldn't work for a few days, and their family suffered. And this Camporian later continues. He said, it would be wrong to suppose that one must wait for the arrival of the 18th century capitalism or even of imperialism in order to see the birth of the problem of the mass spreading of opium derivatives. So yeah, they've been canning out this stuff for a very long time. There's a lot more to this story down below. But let me get to some key elements for now. A key element to the creation of America's drug counterculture was the Grateful Dead, a rock band that passed out LSD to people attending its concerts in the 1960s. Well, this part is actually wrong because I was going to all those concerts. And interestingly enough, I never went to a Grateful Dead concert. I went to a Grateful Dead concert somewhere in the near 2000s because I knew these young kids, and they were deadheads. They were some young kids that lived near me, and they were so amazed that I'd never seen the Grateful Dead that we all went to a Grateful Dead concert. So, but all of the bands were passing out LSD. I'll go on to read. At their concerts, listeners were encouraged to take LSD to tune in, and drop out. So there is a recording of Timothy Leary actually describing the retrograde culture that those who dropped out would participate in. So what they said was, tune in, turn on, drop out, would abandon modern culture and return to the status of a peasant. So, yeah, there's a whole lot to this story, and I'm going to be having to skip past a lot of it now just because of, well, I don't really feel like I can keep talking, but so yeah, I would encourage you to read those articles. There is an entire history to how they started off with Watson, the Bohemian Club, the Skull and Bones, and all this stuff, which led up to how they're in fact drugging us today, right? I said, Watson and his buddy's mushroom trip might have been lost to history, but he was so enraptured by the experience that on his return to New York, he kept talking about it to his friends, and one of them wrote in his book. I don't know if it means anything. We keep reading here. I've got to close off this article and this whole conversation here. So anyway, yeah, so it wasn't Timothy Leary who started this whole thing. I'm going to put this on hold, see if I can catch my breath and come back because this is pretty important to know the rest of it. I'm going to try to read a little bit more and then I'll be closing this up because it's a lot. Let me give you an example. An example of how the elements, Bernays is the godfather of all this marketing, right? Bernays introduced would eventually blossom into the counterculture. Jim Morrison of the Doors. He was named, which I never knew this, after Aldous Huxley book, The Doors of Perception. Morrison performed the same onstage miming of masturbation that Nijinsky had, but to a far larger audience. To further debase his listeners, Morrison sang about a young man acting out Freud's Oedipus complex in the end, an ode to an apocalypse of a culture where all the children are insane. The killer awoke before dawn. He put his boots on. He took a face. I don't think I had my recorder on, but I don't know what to do, so let me just keep talking here. I saw The Doors twice, and I think I can pick up where I cut myself. That's why I try not to turn the microphone off and on. Okay, so let me repeat this song because it's a pretty big one. As an example of how the elements Bernays, the godfather of marketing, introduced would eventually blossom into the counterculture. Jim Morrison of the Doors, which I never knew this, was named after Aldous Huxley's book, The Doors of Perception. Morrison performed the same onstage miming of masturbation that Nijinsky had, but to a far larger audience. To further debase his listeners, Morrison sang about a young man acting out Freud's Oedipus complex in the song The End, an ode to an apocalypse of a culture where all the children are insane. The song went like this. The killer awoke before dawn. He put his boots on. He took a face from the ancient gallery and he walked on down the hall. He went into the room where his sister lived, and then he paid a visit to his brother, and then he walked on down the hall, and he came to a door, and he looked inside. Father, yes, son, I want to kill you. Mother, I want to, wah! As a matter of fact, I saw the Doors twice in concert in Santa Barbara around 1968-69 timeframe. And the second time we saw Jim Morrison perform, I think it was at the Santa Barbara Bowl, doesn't matter. But anyway, so the opening act was the Chambers Brothers. They were just getting popular in that song, Time Has Come Today. Anyway, so we all loved the Chambers Brothers because it was new to all of us. So when the Doors came on stage, Jim Morrison started acting so crazy that they actually opened the gates to the concert and most of the kids started leaving. Well, I will give you a full confession. Why did I stay? My friends and I stayed and watched the rest of the concert. Well, we stayed because, well, we were fairly clever kids and we knew that we had just taken some mescaline, I think. It was the first time we didn't take LSD. We took something else, and everybody in the audience, their faces had turned to cartoon figures. So anyway, so he gets out on the stage and he pulls off. He now remember we were distance from the stage, but not that far away. But he pulled it. It appeared to us in the stage in the audience. He gets up on the stage, he's acting all crazy, and this is right at the very beginning from when they came on stage, and it appeared that he unzipped his pants and started doing some sort of sexual act. Well, we didn't know what was going on, right? A, because we were all pretty high, and B, the kids were alarmed because he started performing this weird deal. It looked like he had his penis out. So a lot of the kids, they opened the gate, and this had never happened at a concert before. And I went to see a lot of these people. I was in Santa Barbara at the time. All the big bands came through Santa Barbara during that time. This was the only time I can tell you that I was at one of these concerts that they opened the gates and the kids were actually all leaving. because of how insane he was acting on the stage. So yeah, so unfortunately or fortunately, we hung around and watched the thing because we were just too high to leave. So okay, so let me keep going here. So yeah, going on stage and yelling everybody's going to die and the kids are all going to go crazy. Actually, I did know a lot of kids who went a bit nuts, right? Fortunately or unfortunately for me, my dad straightened me out, my military father, because he made the bold move and I had to leave home 2 days after I graduated from high school because we were doing so much of this kind of stuff. And back then, they didn't know what was going on because the marijuana didn't smell, they knew we were up to something, but he just didn't know what. And I thank him to this day because forcing me to leave the house made me jump into action, okay? Because then I had to go and get a couple of jobs to afford my apartment in Santa Barbara after I moved out of their house, which was an hour or two away. So yeah, it snapped me awake, and it was a very smart move on his part because it did work. So one last thing about the Bernays person, he said, human beings need to have Godhead symbols, and public relations councils must help to create them. Bernays says his idol making, Bernays saw his idol making as vital to the salvation of society. We have no being in the air to watch over us. We must watch over ourselves, and that is where public relations counselors can prove their effectiveness by making the public believe that human gods are watching over us for our own benefit. These human gods, created by astute public relations, will keep order by giving their followers reasons to live and goals to accomplish it. Bernays manufactured the public's adoration of Enrico Caruso, which is often called America's first pop star. Bernays wrote, the overwhelming majority of the people who reacted so spontaneously to Caruso had never heard of him before. The public's ability to create its own heroes from wisps of impressions and its own imagination and to build them almost into flesh and blood gods fascinated me. Of course, I knew the ancient gods and other early civilized peoples had done this, but now it is happening before my eyes in contemporary America. Well, it is happening, right? People are glued to those TV screens. They're glued to all these rituals. we're all being directed to do rituals right now, and I can see how all of this mind stuff works on people that aren't as sharp or as concerned about being on their toes, right? So I think that I didn't know anything about these pills like Valiums and stuff open up those pathways. That's very interesting because everybody is on these pills. So is that making them more susceptible to suggestions? Well, yeah, I would say so because people they all seem to agree that we're a two-team system, right? One team is good, the other team is bad. We have basically all bought the propaganda to the point that we are also all pretty much collectively taking the pills, right? So I think that it has, to a great degree, it has been a fairly effective plan. They put those doctors in those white coats and people just fell into line, right? If you say anything about a doctor, you're crazy. I went through this when I tried to get off the medications because it was viewed totally as any desire to want to stop taking medication was further indicator that I was in fact crazy. So we have really been put into quite an interesting little corner, right? What they say, though it seems incredible, Esalen and Huxley, Bernays, Wasson, and Dulles appear to have been part of a secret agenda with the U.S. government that intends to usher in a post-modernism, neo-feudalism dark age, and slavery in America. What makes this particularly difficult to believe is the unanswered question of the organization's motivation. What would motivate them? Racism, classism, religious fever, power, all of the above? And how would it be able to maintain such secrecy involving certainly hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals over such a long time? One thing is clear, whatever is the basis of this organization, it resides within identifiable secret societies. We are basically run like a huge cult. So I'm going to be closing this off, and if I find things that I'd like to bring up later, I certainly will, but all of the information is down below. I certainly hope that you're able to go and study it on your own for a bit here, because these Huxley people really put the fix in. And here again, the one Thomas Henry Huxley was born May 1825. Why do we keep incorporating around that same time? Because Thomas Henry Huxley, became known as Darwin's bulldog for his advocacy of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. But yet the Huxleys are viewed as heroes, right? There's this one theory that I'll close out here with. It's very important to know. It's called polypharmacy, overprescribed drugs. And it's not just one drug. It's called polypharmacy. When a person takes 5 or more drugs at the same time, and that has risen right now to alarming levels. In the mid 1990s, most people taking prescription, and I'm only talking about the United States right now, right? The big satanic experiment. In the mid 1990s, most people taking prescription medicine were on one drug. But today, people take prescription meds are likely to be taking 5 or more drugs simultaneously. A 2019 report found that antidepressants, opioid pain medications, proton pump inhibitors for digestion, and levothyroxine for thyroid issues were among the most overprescribed drugs in America. Elsewhere, research has revealed that antibiotics are often prescribed for symptoms like a sore throat or a cough when they shouldn't be. More money, more drugs. Long-term use of multiple prescription drugs has potential health impacts, but it also impacts our wallets. From 1980 to 2018, per capita spending on prescription drugs spiked more than 700%. In 1980, we were spending $140 a year on prescription drugs. It went up to, let me see here. Oh, wait a minute. From adjusting for inflation, it went up 700% from $140 to over $1,000. Prescription drug expenditures hit $335 billion in 2018, and that spending is projected to hit $875 billion by 2026. So they're saying the difference, this is pretty incredible. Give me a second here. The difference between 1980, okay, Prescription drugs hit 335 billion in 2018. Okay, that was we're right now 2024. So in 2018, it was 3.33, excuse me, I'm sorry, 335 billion. And that spending is projected to hit 875 billion by 2026. Wow, 335 billion in 2018 to 875 billion in 2026. That is a lot of money on pills and drugs, wouldn't you say? So much for calling the rest of us crazy, because I don't know. Let me see here. I skipped past my last part here, so let me get that done. Higher impact on women. An average newborn boy in 2019 can expect to take prescription drugs for about 37 years, or 48% of his life. A newborn girl, also born in 2019, could expect to take them for approximately 47.5 years, or 60% of her life. I'm trying to scroll down here. Give me a minute. Yeah. Okay. I'm almost done here. Almost done. Let me just keep focused here. When I try to scroll down, it just flies down. So, okay, there I made. Okay. The impact on women is greater. The study suggests because most American women start taking prescription drugs by the age of 15 years old. We see that women start taking prescription drugs earlier than men do, and some of that is related to birth control and hormonal contraceptives. But it also is related to greater use of psychotherapeutic drugs and painkillers among women. There's a large body of research, and you're going to find this amazing, right? That shows Americans are less healthy and live shorter than our counterparts in other high income countries. I wonder why that is. The prescription drug part is part and parcel of that reality. What we find is, even above and beyond what we might expect to be seen, the rates of prescription drug use in the United States are extraordinarily high. And we also have this attitude that people have been cooked into believing that drugs from the doctor are good, right? Well, now every drug is really coming from the streets as far as I can tell it. But I don't know what I skipped past and didn't record on this show, because I didn't notice the recorder was off for a while. But that's why I don't tend to turn the recorder off. But hey, I did it. So, right, what else can I do about it? So if I find that I left a significant part off of this show, I certainly will mention it the next time I do another show. I suggest you looky for yourself. There is no point in my sharing my work if people are just going to sit there and nod along. That is not my goal here. In order for you to explain this to all the sleeping masses, and this conversation comes up often, people say, well, the rest of the people around here, they're just a bunch of sheep. Well, maybe not, right? Maybe they just don't want to talk to the rest of us. Or maybe we need to consider the fact that we were all in the same position as they are right now. In the past, we didn't know all this stuff, now did we? So we don't want to put ourselves in a position that we're now lording that position over on others within our own tribe. 100% of my motivation for giving you all of those links and hoping that you look further yourself is because, in order to really explain it well enough, you need to understand it as well as I do. And in the context of one show in 1 hour or so, I can't tell it all to you, because right now, because of my death, I'm limited, right? So if you take the time to read what I have below and get these Huxley straight in your own head, you will find it much easier to hopefully communicate this to others in our tribe. Because remember, The operation that we need to work under is we cannot antagonize and persuade at the same time. Everybody is taking these pills. Well, you may want to feel like knocking them out of their hands because you can now see that, grandma and your mom and everybody taking these pills is actually harming themselves. Knocking them out of their hands will not work. We need to be the informers for the rest of the tribe. And the only way to help the rest of them out is to not call them names. I don't like it when they call me crazy, so I'm trying to not call other people names. That's my goal, at least. And also, when we understand it better, we can approach it more logically. You can approach them gently with maybe a comment or something like that. But the minute we turn on the fire hose of information on other people, we are, in fact, shutting them down. Figure out ways to communicate without shutting other people down would be my suggestion, because the majority, and I mean the vast majority of people, have bought into this thing. They really feel like they have to take these drugs because all those people in the white coats they see as the saviors. Well, we know better now, don't we? So let's see if we can kind of fan out and help in a positive way. They're part of our tribe. Let's put them into the pack with the rest of us by an approach that they will learn to take a look at for themselves. All we can do is try to communicate what we know. We can't beat anyone else into submission. That would be like trying to get them to join your own personal cult. And I'm not trying to run a cult or be part of a cult. We need to learn to work within our own class group. We need to share ideas. Hey, how did you fix that cold that you had? Hey, I noticed you had a cut. How did you fix that? You could say things like, well, I used a drop of honey on that cut and it actually worked. There's lots of things out there. There's actually books out there that you can research that will show old-time methods for healing things on your own. Not everything takes a rush to a doctor to take a look at. But hey, I'm not saying if your kid breaks his arm, you should make him suffer. There's certain things that you certainly need to get help from. But remember this, if you're struggling with finances, which most of us are, seeking medical help in this country is both dangerous and costly. A lot of people lose their homes over bankruptcy in this country. They go bankrupt over those high medical bills. So I don't know, completely up to you. But we can also do things for ourselves, because right now, if I had not figured out this marijuana as medicine thing, I got to tell you, the anxiety in this house from all this generation of electricity, I would have had a heart attack ages ago. That's one thing. Good morning, Virginia. Hello, Brussels. That's one thing they probably never knew that I would be doing. I decided that something was coming up in the future that I did not know about. And I, for some reason, thought I better learn about marijuana. Boy, am I lucky that I did. My cats aren't throwing up all over the place. I'm not throwing up all over the place. And I have lived to talk another day, right? Much to their chagrin, their euthanasia plot against me has not worked out quite like they thought it. But it's the weed and all that used through that distillate is very cost effective. It is the only thing that is keeping the anxiety somewhat under control, so I'm not pushed immediately into a heart attack. Just imagine why we don't touch electrical wires, because our bodies cannot take that push. That's why they want us under high electrical charges. So yeah, marijuana is, in fact, we all have the CBD components in our bodies. I explain it all on my website. Are any of us around here stumbling around? No, of course not. Because any dose, and it depends on how you take your dose, I have so many pain issues that it immediately goes to those areas. That is why old people now stumble around, end up all kinds of other issues, because the drugs they're getting from the doctor make them stumble around. So be safe out there. Goodbye for now. And if I missed something when I didn't have the recorder on, I'll certainly let you know next time I have the recorder on. So be safe out there. And one thing about the COVID around here that I've noticed is that it appears to me, and remember this, I'm just going to tell you have a little chat right now. I have taken a fair amount of heat from the Bible crowd, right? When I first started sharing my work about the Bible part, in the last few years, what do you mean you don't like the Bible? What's wrong with you? You need Jesus to save you. Well, first of all, I never came on board with the Jesus thing, okay? So I've always had this aggressive approach towards me from the Bible people telling me all kinds of things that if I don't take Jesus before I die, that, he died for our sins. Well, I don't even know the guy, right? So why are they pushing this Jesus died for my sins? Well, so what's going on around here now, right? So we all think of religious people as love thy neighbor, right? Well, how much do they really love their neighbor if the people in this coven here are willing to turn high-level transformers on me in my home? They are, in fact, murdering me right here in the open. So what does that mean? What does that mean about that Bible, right? Love thy neighbor? So I guess the plan is you love your neighbors around here unless they happen to be wise to who you people are, and then all bets are off. Because other people in the neighborhood have now left the neighborhood, I'm presuming to avoid the high levels of electricity. But I have to ask all of you people out there, how Christian is that, right? How Christian is it that you turn on all the electricity to murder me, a person within your own community, living here in my own home that has not caused any issues to anybody? And somehow, in your own minds, you have decided that murdering me is an okay plot. I think people that are right now murdering the rest of us just seem like they might have a lot to answer for. But hey, what do I know? I'm just an old woman living in Nebraska. Be safe out there. Goodbye for now.